Honestly, I never imagined I'd be sharing my story here, but sometimes life steers you into unexpected territory. This is one chapter one never wanted to write, but maybe, just maybe, it can keep someone else from repeating the same missteps. Heather and I were together in marriage for 12 years. I believed we had a solid life. Steady, routine, and even filled with moments of happiness. Naturally, no relationship is without its flaws, and we definitely had our share of hard times. Still, I never foresaw what was waiting around the corner. That evening, I came home earlier than I usually did. My plan was to surprise Heather with her favorite dessert and hopefully spend a calm evening reconnecting. She'd been pulling away emotionally, and I wanted to show I was still committed. As soon as I stepped inside, something felt wrong. The lights were low, and I heard the soft hum of voices coming from the living room. At first, I figured she might have invited a friend over. But when I stepped in, the sight that greeted me brought everything to a standstill. Heather was sitting far too close to a man I had never seen before. He was sharply dressed, carried himself with confidence, and had the kind of charisma that instantly drew attention. She laughed at something he said, a laugh I hadn't heard from her in ages. But it wasn't just the laughter. It was her body language, the way she leaned into him, and how his hand hovered on the couch near hers. They were completely unaware I had arrived. I cleared my throat, and when Heather turned toward me, her expression shifted immediately. She looked pale, stunned. "Mike," she muttered, hastily pulling away from him like she'd only just realized what was happening. The man didn't even blink. He simply turned and looked at me with this calm, slightly amused look, like he had nothing to hide. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't lash out. I just stood there, silently watching the woman I believed I knew, and the truth of what our marriage had become hit me like a wave. "I can explain," she began, her voice trembling, but I didn't want to hear a single excuse. I turned and walked out without another word. Heather rushed after me, grabbed my arm, pleading, "Mike, please, let's talk. It's not what it looks like." I gently pulled away from her. "No, Heather, it's exactly what it looks like." She broke into tears, begging for forgiveness, calling it a moment of confusion, saying it was a one-time thing, that she still loved me. But in that instant, I felt nothing. No rage, no heartbreak, just a hollow void. I didn't go back inside. I didn't argue or cry. I simply walked away. That night marked the end of my marriage, but it wasn't the final chapter. Not even close. The experience of leaving that night felt unreal. Just a few hours earlier, I was a husband planning a peaceful evening. Suddenly, I became a man abandoning everything he had worked to build. I booked a room at a nearby hotel and switched off my phone. I knew Heather would keep trying to reach out, but I wasn't ready to listen. Nothing she said could erase what I had seen. The following morning, I forced myself to get through the workday. I answered emails, showed up for meetings, did everything expected of me, but my thoughts were miles away. People around me could sense something was off, but thankfully, no one asked questions. I was grateful for the silence. Later that evening, I finally looked at my phone. 53 missed calls. Voicemails from Heather flooded the screen, her voice shifting between sorrowful apologies, sobbing pleas, and desperate attempts to explain what I had witnessed. One message stood out, though. It came from a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated but hit play. "Mike," a woman's voice began. "I know you don't know me, but we need to talk. It's about Heather. Please call me back." I furrowed my brow. Who was she, and what could she possibly reveal that I didn't already understand? My curiosity won out. I dialed the number, and she answered almost immediately. "Mike," she said. "Who is this?" I asked. "My name is Lisa," she replied. "I used to be Heather's friend." I stayed quiet, waiting for her to continue. "I was there the night you came home," she said carefully. "And I know what Heather told you, but there's something she left out." I sat up, tense. "I don't care about the specifics," I said with little emotion. "It won't change anything." Lisa paused. "I get that, but Mike..." This wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment. A chill crept through me. "What do you mean?" She exhaled slowly. I mean, Heather and Charles. That's his name. Have been seeing each other for several months. My hand tightened around the phone. I thought I'd already reached emotional numbness. But this? It hit different. She told you it didn't mean anything. Lisa went on, her tone softening. But that wasn't true. It was never just some meaningless mistake. I was at a loss for words. I'm telling you this because I've seen who Heather really is, Lisa continued. She'll twist the narrative, try to manipulate you into feeling like you overreacted. But you didn't, Mike. You have the right to know what really happened. I swallowed hard. Why are you telling me all this? There was a brief silence. Then she said, because I used to be her friend. And I watched her do things that didn't sit right with me. I couldn't stay quiet anymore. You deserve better than this. I let out a long breath. Thanks for being honest. Take care of yourself, Mike, she said, then ended the call. I stared at my phone, thoughts racing. Several months. This hadn't been a brief mistake, it was something far deeper. What happened was intentional, a conscious decision. And now I had to figure out what came next. Sitting alone in my hotel room, I stared blankly at my phone long after Lisa had ended the call. A storm of feelings churned inside me, anger, betrayal, and sheer exhaustion. The thought that Heather had been living a double life for months, all while pretending everything was normal, made me feel sick. I considered calling her, confronting her with what Lisa had revealed. But what good would that do? She would likely deny everything, twist the story, and offer more carefully crafted half-truths. Instead, I did something I hadn't done since I walked away from everything. I opened my email. There, waiting in my inbox, was a lengthy message from Heather. The subject line read, "Please, just listen, Mike. I know you're avoiding me, but I need you to read this. I made a terrible mistake. I was selfish and careless, and I hate myself for it. But what you think you saw, it wasn't the full story. Yes, I spent time with Charles, and yes, that was wrong. But you and we've been distant for so long. I felt invisible, like I didn't matter anymore. Being around him made me feel noticed again. That doesn't excuse what I did, but I need you to understand I never intended to hurt you. I still love you, Mike. I don't want to lose you. Please, can we have one honest conversation? Just one. That's all I ask. Heather." My jaw tightened as I fought to stay composed. Her words felt calculated, as if she were flipping the narrative to focus on her pain instead of the damage she had done. I'd seen this kind of thing before, in stories of betrayal and heartbreak where the one who broke trust always had an excuse. Now I was living one of those stories. Still, a sliver of doubt lingered. We had shared 12 years together, over a decade of shared history, laughter, and life. Could I really just erase all of it so easily? I shut the laptop with a snap. I needed space to think. I threw on a jacket and stepped out into the evening. The cool air greeted me, brushing against my face as I walked. The city carried on around me, cars gliding past, people laughing in the distance, the low murmur of life continuing as though my world hadn't just been turned upside down. Without planning it, my feet led me to a familiar building, Lisa's apartment. I paused at the entrance, unsure if I was making the right decision. But she had been honest with me, and right now truth was the one thing I craved. After a moment of hesitation, I knocked. The door opened and Lisa stood there, clearly surprised but not displeased to see me. "Mike," she said, stepping aside to let me in. "I didn't expect you'd come." "I need answers," I told her. "And I think you're the only one willing to give them." She gave a slight nod. "Come in." Her place was modest but welcoming. Warm yellow light filled the room and the faint scent of coffee lingered in the air. She motioned for me to sit as she poured 2 mugs. I didn't know whether I needed coffee or something stronger, but either way, I needed something to keep me grounded. I took a sip, then placed the cup down and looked at her intently. "Tell me everything." Lisa let out a breath and crossed her arms. "I figured you'd want the whole story. Heather knows how to make things sound less severe than they are." I nodded, bracing for the answer. "How long has this been going on?" She paused before finally saying, "Almost a year." My stomach turned. I had been prepared for a few months, maybe. But a year? That meant through anniversaries, birthdays, holidays, she had already emotionally checked out. She told me it started as something emotional, Lisa went on. Said Charles was someone she could open up to when she felt like you weren't hearing her. I gave a bitter laugh. She never once told me she felt unheard. If that was how she felt, why didn't she say something? Lisa gave a small shrug. Because saying it would mean trying to fix things. And Charles made her feel appreciated again, like she mattered. That newness was exciting for her. I shook my head and gripped the edge of the table. "How did you find out?" She hesitated, then admitted, "I caught them. Months ago. I saw them at a restaurant, seated in a private booth." She looked guilty when she saw me, but Charles? He acted like it was no big deal. My jaw clenched. That sounded exactly like something he'd do, arrogant and unbothered. I confronted her afterward, Lisa continued. Told her she was headed down a dangerous path. She said she'd end it. Promised even. But clearly she didn't. Of course she hadn't. I leaned back in my chair, staring up at the ceiling. The weight of a year's worth of deceit pressed down on me. Lies on top of more lies, and I had been completely unaware. Lisa watched me quietly. Mike, I didn't bring this to you to cause pain. But you deserve honesty. Heather isn't who you thought she was. I exhaled slowly. Yeah. I think I'm finally starting to realize that. We sat in silence until Lisa finally broke it. So, what are you going to do now? I thought about it. I had already walked out, already ignored her messages and denied her the opportunity to sway me. But something inside me still wanted clarity. Closure, maybe? I'm not sure, I admitted truthfully. Lisa frowned, concern flickering in her eyes. Just be careful. Heather doesn't deal well with losing control. If she feels like she's slipping, she might act out. That unsettling thought sent a chill down my spine. Heather had always been the kind of person who found a way to get what she wanted. And when things didn't go her way, she had a knack for manipulating situations to her advantage. I told myself I wouldn't fall for whatever scheme she was concocting. Lisa gave me a look that said it all, like she knew exactly how dangerous Heather could be. Just don't underestimate her, she warned. As I walked out of Lisa's apartment that evening, a realization hit me hard. I wasn't just dealing with infidelity. This was someone who had spent an entire year lying to my face, who had become comfortable living a lie. People like that didn't just walk away quietly. I didn't return to my hotel that night. Instead, I drove around aimlessly, letting my thoughts churn through everything Lisa had shared with me. A full year, 12 months of deceit. Heather had pretended to be a devoted wife while living a completely different life in secret. And now she wanted to talk? I didn't know which was worse, the betrayal itself or her belief that she could somehow talk her way out of it. By the time I pulled into the parking lot outside my office, dawn was just breaking over the city. I hadn't closed my eyes all night, but there was no point in sitting around waiting for her next move. I needed to reclaim some control over my life. As I stepped out of the car, my phone buzzed. A message popped up from an unknown number. Unknown. Meet me at the coffee shop on 5th. 1 hour. It's important. I stared at the message, frowning. Who could this be? It didn't seem like Heather. She would have just called. Lisa? That didn't make sense either. I considered ignoring it, but my curiosity won out. Whoever this was had something they needed to say. An hour later, I stepped into the quiet coffee shop. Only a few tables were occupied, and I scanned the room, looking for someone who might be waiting. Then I saw him, Charles. He was seated in the corner like he owned the place, dressed sharply in a tailored suit, sipping an espresso with all the calm of someone who hadn't just shattered my world. The audacity was staggering. I nearly turned around and walked out. But then he looked up and gave a smug smile. Mike, he said, motioning to the chair across from him. Glad you showed up. I sat down, jaw clenched, hands balled into fists beneath the table. What do you want? He took another slow sip, completely unbothered. Thought you might have a few questions. I let out a bitter laugh. Questions? Like how long this has been going on between you and my wife? Or how you can sit here like this is all normal? He gave a lazy shrug. Heather made her decisions. And so did you. My eyes narrowed. What exactly is that supposed to mean? Charles leaned in and placed his cup down gently. It's over between me and Heather. She's falling apart without you. Crying, spiraling, she doesn't know how to handle it. He gave a twisted little grin. It's actually kind of sad. A wave of nausea hit me. Despite everything, hearing him talk about her like that lit a fire inside me. What's your point? I asked sharply. He drummed his fingers on the table. My point is, she wants you back badly. And when people get desperate, they tend to make foolish decisions. I stiffened at that. What exactly are you implying? He let out a sigh, clearly bored. I'm saying if I were in your shoes, I'd be careful. Heather's not someone who lets go without a fight. I studied him, trying to figure out if he was just toying with me. But the calm certainty in his tone unnerved me. He stood, adjusted his jacket with care, and glanced down at me. Figured you should know, he said simply, tossing some money on the table. Good luck, Mike. Then, without another word, he walked out. I stayed there, my coffee untouched, thoughts running wild. Heather was losing control, and the last person I expected, Charles, was the one issuing the warning. Something wasn't adding up. I pulled out my phone and stared at Heather's last email. Maybe it was time to hear her out, not because I wanted reconciliation, but because I needed to understand what she was really planning. If Charles was telling the truth, then this whole mess was far from over. It might only be the beginning. Long after Charles had gone, I remained seated at the table, my drink still untouched. Heather was unraveling, or at least, that's what Charles claimed. I didn't know if I believed him, but the calm assurance in his words left me unsettled. Over the past several days, I'd been ignoring Heather, her calls, her emails, all her attempts to reach out. Part of me thought she would eventually accept it, that she would come to terms with the fact that our marriage had ended. But what if that wasn't happening? What if she couldn't move on? The thought made my chest tighten. I unlocked my phone, and for the first time since walking out, I dialed her number. The call barely rang once before she answered. "Mike," she said, her voice hoarse and trembling. "Oh my God. I thought you'd never call me again." I exhaled deeply, already second-guessing this decision. "We need to talk. In person." "Yes, absolutely," she responded quickly. "Please. Just tell me when and where." "Tonight," I told her. 7 o'clock. The park near our old place. It's neutral. "I'll be there," she promised. I ended the call before she could say another word. Later that evening, the park was still and peaceful, the sun slowly dipping below the horizon. I stood near a bench, hands shoved deep into my pockets, mentally preparing myself for what was coming. Heather showed up just minutes later. The moment her eyes found mine, she rushed toward me, her face already streaked with tears. She appeared worn down, almost unrecognizable, her eyes tired, face tense, as though she hadn't rested in days. "Mike," she breathed out as she reached for my arm. Instinctively, I stepped back. "Talk," I said firmly, keeping my distance. She hesitated, swallowing hard as her eyes fluttered in rapid blinks. "I know I messed everything up. I know I hurt you," she began, her voice trembling. "But you have to understand, I never wanted things to fall apart. I never intended to ruin what we had." I stayed quiet, letting her speak. She inhaled shakily, trying to gather herself. "At first, it seemed harmless. Charles was just a way to escape. Someone who made me feel something again when things between us felt empty. But I swear to you, Mike, I never stopped loving you." My jaw tightened. "That's not what love looks like, Heather." Tears spilled down her face. "I know," she whispered. "After you left, everything collapsed. Charles dropped me like I didn't matter. And now, I don't even know how to move forward." I studied her closely, uncertain whether this was another one of her carefully staged performances. But something about her demeanor was different. She didn't look calculating. She looked genuinely lost. "Mike," she whispered, barely audible. "I don't know how to live without you." I let out a slow breath. "Maybe you should have thought of that before you decided to betray me." A soft sob escaped her lips. "I'm sorry. Truly." I shook my head. "I didn't come here to hear apologies. I only have one question. Can you accept that this is truly over?" Her eyes widened as they locked onto mine, filled with desperation. For a moment, I thought she might collapse again. But then something shifted in her gaze. A flicker of defiance. Her lips quivered, but instead of agreeing, she murmured, "Are you absolutely certain?" I tensed. "What do you mean?" Heather wiped away her tears and took a steady breath. "Because if you walk away now, Mike, I don't think you'll be happy with the consequences." A cold sensation crawled down my spine. Was that a threat? I instinctively stepped back, suddenly unsure who I was facing. "I just needed to know," she said softly. "I'll see you around, Mike." And just like that, she turned and disappeared into the shadows of the night. I stood frozen, watching her vanish. Something deep inside me whispered that this wasn't over. Not even close. I left the park that night feeling more unsettled than I had in a long time. Her words weren't just desperate attempts to patch things up, they carried something darker, something calculated. She might have accepted that I was walking away, but it felt like she had already anticipated it. As I drove back to my apartment, I kept trying to push the unease aside. I told myself I was reading too much into it, that she was just hurting and lashing out. But the gnawing feeling in my gut didn't ease up. When I got home, a new email was waiting in my inbox. From Heather. I hovered over it for a few moments before opening it. "Mike, I meant what I said. If you don't want to be with me, I'll respect that. But before you walk away for good, there's something you should know. I wasn't the only one keeping secrets. There's something about Charles, something important. And it affects you more than you realize. I have proof. If you want to learn the truth, meet me tomorrow night. If not, then I guess you'll find out eventually. Heather." My eyes stayed glued to the screen as my heart pounded. What was she talking about? My first reaction was skepticism. Another attempt to manipulate me, to reel me back in. But her tone, it was different this time. She wasn't begging. She wasn't even asking for forgiveness. It felt like she was trying to warn me. Part of me wanted to delete the email and never look back. Just leave this whole disaster behind me. But I couldn't. Because what if she was telling the truth? The following evening, I agreed to meet Heather at a quiet little cafe on the outskirts of town. It was the kind of place we used to go when we were still happy before everything fell apart. I arrived slightly early and scanned the space as I stepped inside. It was nearly deserted. Heather was already there, seated at a corner table. A plain envelope rested in front of her. She looked nothing like the tearful woman I had seen the night before. She was composed, collected, almost cold. I sat down across from her. "I don't have time for games, Heather. Say what you need to say." Without a word, she pushed the envelope toward me. "Open it." I hesitated briefly, then picked it up and slid out a small stack of photographs. The moment I looked at them, my breath hitched. There was Charles. But not just him. In the pictures, he was with my boss. They were talking, shaking hands, clearly having private meetings. In one image, a contract bearing my company's logo was visible on the table between them. I stared at the photos, my hands gripping them tightly. "What is this?" Heather leaned closer, her eyes sharp and focused. "Charles isn't just some wealthy guy, Mike. He's been involved with your company for a long time. And you've been part of it without even realizing." My thoughts spiraled. That can't be true. She let out a slow breath. "Think it over. Why do you think he latched onto me? Why didn't he care if you found out about us? He didn't just want your relationship, Mike. He wanted your position. Your career." A chill crept through me. No, that couldn't be real. But then I began to recall every interaction, every detail. Charles had always carried himself with an air of arrogance, as if he were privy to some secret I wasn't. My boss had recently grown more aloof, and there were several important deals I had mysteriously been excluded from. Then suddenly everything made sense. Heather hadn't been lying. Charles had manipulated me all along. My jaw tightened with anger. I asked, "Why are you telling me all of this now?" Her face softened and she replied gently, "Because no matter what happened between us, I don't want to watch him destroy you. You don't deserve that." For the first time since all this chaos began, I actually believed her. I let out a breath and stared down at the photos again. This situation had grown far beyond the scope of my broken marriage. It was about betrayal, deception, and power. And I wasn't about to let Charles come out on top. Sitting in that small cafe, I looked closely at the images Heather had handed over. Charles and my boss, side by side, smiling, shaking hands, signing documents. The shock of their affair had been devastating enough. But this was another level. This wasn't just betrayal, it was strategic, calculated, and deeply personal. I took a deep breath, trying to make sense of it all. "Where did you even get these?" I asked, lifting my eyes to Heather. She hesitated before responding. "When I was with him, I wasn't completely in the dark. I noticed strange behavior, calls he refused to take around me, meetings that didn't quite add up. Then one night, he left his laptop open. I looked through it. I raised an eyebrow. "You went through his computer files?" Heather exhaled slowly. "I know I'm probably the last person you trust right now, but yes. I did. And that's how I found out he had been meeting with your boss regularly for months. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. But after you left, I started piecing things together." I gritted my teeth and flipped through the photos once more. Why would Charles care about my company? He's already wealthy. He's got everything. Heather shook her head. Not quite. He craved influence. He wanted power. And most of all, he wanted what you had, your position, your authority. That realization hit me hard. He hadn't just betrayed me with Heather, he had conspired with my boss to remove me entirely. And I had walked into their trap without suspecting a thing. I exhaled slowly, weighing the gravity of the situation. "So, what now?" I asked. Heather looked hesitant but then pushed a small USB drive across the table. "This contains everything I found. Emails, contracts, messages. If you want to take him down, this is your chance." I stared at the flash drive. Something so small held the power to dismantle everything Charles had built. It could expose his lies, reveal his plans, and stop him in his tracks. I looked up at Heather. "Why are you really helping me?" Her eyes shimmered with emotion. "Because I made a terrible mistake, Mike. The worst of my life. And even if I don't deserve forgiveness, I want to try to make things right." For the first time, I believed her completely. I took the USB and stood up. "I need to go," I said firmly. Heather nodded and wiped away a tear. "I understand." I turned to leave, then paused and looked back at her one last time. "I'm not going to forgive what you did," I said truthfully. "But I do appreciate this." She gave me a faint smile. "That's more than I deserve." I walked out of the cafe without glancing back. The following day, I walked into my office with the USB tucked safely in my pocket and my heart racing. I went straight to human resources, then immediately to legal. Within an hour, my boss was under investigation. By that afternoon, Charles's name was making headlines. It turned out he had been channeling money illegally through the company, attempting not just to steal my job but to hide financial misconduct. By the next morning, Charles's world began to collapse. His inner circle abandoned him, investors withdrew their support, and the deals he had spent years crafting disintegrated in a matter of hours. As for me, I was offered my boss's position. Once people saw what Charles had really been doing, they realized I had been the only honest person in the room the whole time. A month later, Heather tried reaching out a few times. I never responded, not out of hatred, but because that part of my life was done. I had a clean slate, a better career, peace of mind. And Charles? Let's just say, I'm certain he won't be showing up in my life again. I may have lost my marriage, but I gained everything else.